The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Prost, and welcome to another episode of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author. This is going to be an interesting, fun episode. This is actually an event that I've always wanted to go to for many, many, many years. Before we get started, let me start by extending condolences to everybody affected by Hurricane Ian. We have had some breweries, especially in Southwest Florida, in Collier and Lee counties and on up the coast, that have received quite a bit of damage. There are a few breweries, I know of one in particular, Crazy Dingo in Fort Myers, that may not be reopening anytime soon, if at all. Obviously, I hope that they are able to open soon. I know that they've reached out to other breweries to keep a hold of their product. I know good friend of the podcast, Riptide Brewing, both of their locations in Naples and Bonita are closed, and there looks to be some water damage in Naples. So definitely keep an eye on social media. Follow all the breweries that you like. If there's anything that they need, please see what you can do to help out. There's some other breweries that are currently accepting donations and trying to help out their community as well. I do find it interesting that some other areas, such as Old Coast in St. Augustine, are up and operational, but you may have to get there by boat, or at least that's what it looked like on their social media page a few days before this intro was recorded. Please keep an eye on everything. If you do have any questions or want to help out, feel free to reach out to us as well. We are at floridabeerblog@gmail.com. You can find us on social media at Florida Beer Blog on Instagram and Twitter. FL Beer Blog is on Facebook. And obviously we've got floridabeerblog.com, the main site, and Florida Beer Podcast.com, which is the site for this podcast. All of this is hosted by the Florida Podcast Network. You can find them at floridapodcastnetwork.com. They also have a closed Facebook group at FPN Insiders that I suggest that you join as well. So we're going to start today's podcast all the way over in Germany. I don't know how many years ago, with the great festival known as Oktoberfest. Pretty much every brewery in the country has at least one Oktoberfest beer that comes out around this time. I have not started drinking mine yet. I do have a few that are coming my way. Hopefully I will be able to drink them in very short order. But to talk about Oktoberfest, the way that it's meant to be celebrated, the way that they do it in Munich, I'm going to go ahead and talk to some authentic sources. And that's what led me to the American-German Club of the Palm Beaches. Now, there are a lot of American-German clubs all around the country, and they all have their own Oktoberfest festivals in some way, shape, or form. The American-German Club of the Palm Beaches has been holding theirs since the mid-'70s. And I will actually be going this year, which is very exciting to me. But to get started, I spoke with Jay Vollstedt. He is the membership committee chair and their marketing person at the American-German Club of the Palm Beaches. When I interviewed him, he had just returned from Germany doing the real thing a few days ago. So I spoke to him a little bit about the history of the real Oktoberfest, what it was like over there in Munich, what to expect if you're actually at that particular festival, and how they recreated it over here in Lake Worth, Florida with the American-German Club. Obviously talking a little bit more about the club, who they are, what they celebrate, and some of the exciting things that you'll be able to try if you go and that I'll be able to try when I go. This is going to be part one. The second part I will be recording on site at Oktoberfest in Lake Worth with the American German Club at the Palm Beaches. We'll obviously be talking to Jay and some other people that are at the event. That will be coming out soon. But for right now, let's chat with Jay and learn a little bit more about the greatest beer festival on earth. Enjoy. Do you think most people know what Oktoberfest really is, or do they just assume that it's a giant beer festival?
I'm guessing most non-beer, or I should say German cultural aficionados, are unaware that this really started out as a wedding for, I think it was King Ludwig I and his wife, Teresa. And in fact, if you go to the real Oktoberfest in Munich, the people from Munich don't say they're going to Oktoberfest. They say they're going to the Wiesen. Wiesen is German for meadow. And so it's called the Theresienwiese. Theresienwiese. Yes. And so that's Teresa's meadow. And so it started out as a wedding, and everybody had such a great time. They decided to expand upon it. And there is much more to it than just beer drinking. Back in the day, they'd have competitions, horse races, that type of stuff, rides for the kids and things like that. And we try to emulate that with our club, since it is a cultural club. It's not just a beer drinking club. It's a cultural club, social club as well, but it's really about people who are interested in German culture, food, drink, customs, that type of thing.
And it's kind of amazing because when I've seen pictures of Oktoberfest, you traditionally have the tents and the beer, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but it seems like they have one of the most intense carnivals I've ever seen. Yes.
In Munich, it's really, you can liken it to a state fair, but they have rides that you'll never see at one of our state fairs. Some of it might be because of liability, to be honest. But yeah, in addition to the 14 large tents, beer tents, and I think there's like 20 or 24 smaller beer tents or buildings, there's extensive rides for children or adults to ride on. They have actually the largest mobile roller coaster in the world there, and it's actually got 5 loops. Again, I think that's some sort of record breaker either.
I've seen that one. If I'm correct, it's an old Schwarzkopf 5-looper, and if I'm correct, the loops are colored like the rings on the Olympic flag.
Correct. You are correct. Good call. Yes. So they have that. Yep. And they have one of my favorites. It's something called the Teufelsrad, the Devil's Wheel.
Okay.
And what they do is it's this large wheel, and it's somewhat cone shaped, real low cone. And they'll get a bunch of ladies out there, a bunch of guys out there, and it starts to spin. And the first person or the last person to stay on as it gets spun off is the winner. There's no prize, but just pride of knowing that you did it. But it's a lot of fun. They have a great time. There's so many rides that you can, like I said, you could ignore the beer tents. They have food stands. They have souvenir stands. It really is like a state fair. They have both Tuesdays for the 2 weeks that they run it are family days. And I can tell you that they have school excursions. You'll see entire
really
school. I'm not talking like 12-year-olds. I mean, they have those as well, but right down to 6-year-olds. And they just bring them around. They show them the whole place. So I would consider that, very family friendly. Obviously, during the day, it's better than the evening. Not sure I'd be bringing certainly small children to the fest in the evening. But I have seen teenagers with no problem. They're having a great time on those rides. So they just want to keep riding on into the night.
That's kind of amazing. And so talk to me about the tents, because that seems to be a very popular, I guess, when you see images of Oktoberfest, a lot of the times you're seeing the tents with these huge, gorgeous murals painted on the fabric up top. What are the tents? How are they operated? How do you get in?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, there are 14 major tents. Each tent is sponsored by a particular brewery, and there are only 6 that can actually be at the Oktoberfest in Munich. And they're the original 6 brewers from inside the city limits of Munich. So you have Spaten, you have Löwenbräu, you have Hacker Pschorr, you have Paulaner, you have Hofbräu, which a lot of people in the U.S. are familiar with, and you have Augustiner. And so, again, I couldn't tell you the total breakdown, but I do know, like, for instance, there are 3 Augustiner tents and a couple of Spaten tents. And so, and I think a couple of Hofbräu and again, at least 2 Hacker Shore tents as well. And these tents can hold somewhere between 5 and 9,000 people inside. And then many of them have fairly large beer gardens outside. So if it's a nice day and you can't get into a tent, you can certainly sit out there. It usually takes you getting into their websites as soon as reservations are available, at least in the evenings. So if you're, looking to go to, say, the Hofbräu tent, on a particular evening, you better get your reservations like in January or February when those first come open. And for instance, opening night, you can almost forget about unless you know somebody or you're a returning customer. I've been at the Löwenbräu tent a couple of times, and I think now I could probably get evening reservations with ease because I have a customer number. So that's really the key is to, if you have a large group, make sure you make your reservations well in advance. I went this year, and I had my reservations in February.
That's amazing. I was going to say, you just got back. What kind of trends did you notice? What was it like, especially pre and post COVID?
Yeah, in terms of pre and post COVID, the only difference I would say is that many of the locals were staying away. I read something, and I think my German's good enough to understand. They only had about 60% of the Münchners that would normally come in attendance. It certainly didn't dissuade Americans, Brits, Italians, Australians. There were plenty of them, or even Germans outside of, Bavaria or the Munich area. So that was really the only difference. Was I would say attendance was probably about the same as, say, in 2019, except that it was a lot more foreigners. I mean by foreigners, some people outside of the Munich area, to make up for the loss of some of the Münchners who decided not to come. But trends, I laugh because you say trends. I'm a bit of a Tracht guy. I might have 12 pair of Lederhosen.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah. And so I'm kind of into the whole fashion thing, which is funny because I'm a, shorts and t-shirt kind of guy. But everybody wears Tracht there. I would say if you're not wearing Tracht, Dirndl or Lederhosen for the ladies, Lederhosen for the men, or at least a vest and maybe a hat, you're out of place. I would say 80% of the people wear some form of German Tracht. And it's kind of interesting to see. They do different trends right now. The in color for like Lederhosen, for instance, is gray, which I thought was a little bizarre.
Interesting.
But all the locals seem to have gray Lederhosen. It was kind of funny.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you take an event like Mardi Gras, and they've actually got different Mardi Gras celebrations around the world and definitely around the U.S. And while it's not the oldest, the most popular one is obviously in New Orleans. Are there different Oktoberfest celebrations around Germany, or does it really only focus in Munich and nobody else really touches it?
Well, there are more than enough fests to go around. There's only one Oktoberfest. Most of the others are either called Fall Fests or Volksfest, people's festivals, but they are throughout Bavaria in particular, but I believe they have many of them within Germany or throughout Germany. I noted I had a day trip while I was over there here recently to Salzburg, and they were having a Volksfest that day. I went to an Almabtrieb, which is when the cows are brought down from the mountain and for the winter and kept in the valleys, and they dress them all up with headdresses and they run them through town. And at the end of that, they also have a festival. And so they have the polka bands or the traditional music bands, beers flowing in 1 liter steins. So it seems like the Germans will use any excuse to have a festival. Like I said, goats coming down from the mountain, sheep, it doesn't matter. They will have a festival. And almost every small town has some form of festival, either large or small. And again, with people dressing up in traditional clothing, Tracht, for these events. They're a lot of fun to go to. The smaller ones are actually a lot of fun as well because they're a little more intimate.
Awesome. So let's talk about the beer specifically, because especially when it comes to Oktoberfest, Germans are known for a very specific portfolio of beers, shall we say. And it seems like this is the time of year where 2 of those styles really take precedence. When you go to Oktoberfest in Munich, do you see a wide variety of different styles, or are they really zeroing in on those two?
Yeah, well, there's really, to be honest, at Oktoberfest is really only you can go to some of the little stands outside and maybe get yourself a Weiss beer or a wheat beer. There's one of the tents is dedicated to wine, and there they only sell wheat beer. But every place else, it's the Oktoberfest beer. And by Oktoberfest beer, I'm not talking about the traditional and the amber colored one, which we get a lot in the US and used to be served at the Oktoberfest. I want to say they stopped doing it in the 90s, but I'm talking about the lighter colored Oktoberfest
The fest beer.
Yeah. So they switched it from what I was told. Again, I can't confirm this. I was told that to make it more palatable to people who were not used to the amber color and maybe the slightly toasted taste, they made it a lighter, still very malty, still very rich, same alcohol percent, which usually runs somewhere between 5.9 and 6.2, but they made it lighter to make it more appealing to foreigners or people outside of maybe Bavaria. So
interesting.
So really, it's just that one.
Awesome. And you got to go through all this with your friends at the American-German Club of the Palm Beaches. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Can
Absolutely.
you tell us a little bit about the club and kind of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, it's been around for 55 years. It's been an institution of Palm Beach County. And we've been having the Oktoberfest for almost 50 of that, not quite. So, and I've been around for almost 6 years now. I've been going to the Oktoberfest since the early 90s. And now having been to the Oktoberfest in Munich, the real one, a couple of times, I can tell you it's the sense I get is this is the equivalent of one of the large tents. We have a beautiful pavilion. We have another large tent that we use. In the past, I know they've used nothing but tents before the pavilion was built. On a normal year, and of course, unfortunately, it's still not a normal year. We're hoping for next year. But a normal year, we have an average of about 30,000 people over 2 weekends.
Wow.
And in the tradition of Oktoberfest, we'll have rides and carnival games. We have the food stands. We have obviously the beer and schnapps stands as well. But we typically have our clubhouse open, and that means we actually have 2 bands playing. This year, unfortunately, we're only going to be able to have 1 band playing. But again, it's usually traditional music at the beginning. And much like the real Oktoberfest in Munich, by the evening, it changes to party tunes. So yeah, the papa or the polka music gives way to Bon Jovi, AC/DC. You're still playing Sweet Caroline and things like that. But it definitely progresses throughout the evening. So a lot of fun.
That's kind of amazing. And so the carnival, obviously you don't have that awesome Schwarzkopf 5-looper, but you do have a wide variety of rides for, I guess, kids of all ages?
Yeah. We have a small roller coaster, certainly tiny compared to the ones you'll see at the real Oktoberfest. We have a small roller coaster. We have a Ferris wheel. I'm going to say, I think with the equivalent of, say, like the Scrambler or something like that. There are maybe even a slide. I'm not really sure what they have in store for us this year, the ride vendor, but they always have some really good ones, and the kids love them. And I know they'll be serving cotton candy, things like that, your typical fair food. And it's a lot of fun. And again, it's in an area just outside the pavilion, so not quite as loud as inside the pavilion. So it's a little that's definitely a family-friendly area.
That's cool. And obviously the food, because we got to talk about the food. Obviously, you got the fair foods over there. But in terms of the German specialties, I would hope that we are going to be treated to an awesome array of goodies.
Absolutely. I'll start off with the dessert.
Okay, there we go.
Dessert. But we'll have some traditional dessert. We do have a dessert booth. We also have an outside kitchen that is serving kind of a larger meal there, so that you can get, a meat, a side, roll or a pretzel, that type of thing. And then we also have a roast beef booth, so you can get roast beef sandwiches.
Oh, nice. And
we have a Deutscher Imbiss and also a brat and hot dog booth. So the Deutscher Imbiss is selling things like schnitzel sandwiches, hamburgers, because you have to be able to suit everybody's taste, right? And then And of course, you have bratwurst and hot dogs at the other stand as well. And again, some of these things come with fries, and it's really a kind of a fun little thing. We also have, I think we've got a guy who's going to be selling the candied nuts, which is very traditional.
Really?
You can't walk more than 20 feet at the real Oktoberfest without smelling those wonderful candied almonds or pecans or whatever.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And obviously we got to talk about the beer, because I feel like you and your team have that is a curation that is going to be incredibly important when it comes to the beer. Who do you decide is going to be there? What do you decide? What beers are you going to be making available for purchase? And can you get the full liter Stein to enjoy while you're at the event?
Yes. So much like, and again, I'll say it's in the tradition of the German tradition, where restaurants, beer gardens, and yes, even the Oktoberfest tents, they are sponsored by a particular brewery.
Okay.
And we are as well. Our brewery that we use is the Paulaner / Hockerpschor group.
Okay.
And so we serve beers from both Paulaner and Hockerpschor. So we do have a much larger lineup than you would find at the traditional Oktoberfest. We don't just serve the Oktoberfest beer, but we will have, and this is unusual, I think we're one of the few places currently that will have the not only the traditional Märzen, the amber-colored Oktoberfest beer, and we will call it Märzen, so as not to confuse people. And we'll also have the light-colored Oktoberfest, the stuff that you actually see at the real Oktoberfest. It's slowly but surely making its way into the U.S. I think last year we were one of the only ones that had what we called the Wiesen beer, but that confused people. We don't call it that anymore because they think, oh, so that's a wheat beer. It's like, no. So we'll have those. We'll have both Oktoberfest flavors. In addition to that, we will have a Weiss beer, a wheat beer. We will have a traditional Helles or light beer. We will have a Pilsner, which gives you a little more hoppiness. So it really helps out when you've got somebody who is an IPA drinker and they say, I don't know, what's the closest thing? We give them the Pilsner.
Gotcha.
Because it's quite hoppy. And then we have my favorite, which is the Dunkel or the dark beer. So,
nice.
So yeah, we have a fairly wide variety, in my opinion. We also have some non-alcoholic brands as well. Paulaner has a really nice wheat radler that will be selling as non-alcoholic. And we will also be able to make people radlers if they want them, which is half beer and half Sprite or lemonade. They're called radlers because a Fahrrad is a bicycle in Germany. Okay. And bicyclists would come to beer gardens and they don't want to have to ride their bikes after they've had a couple of liters of beer. And so they would get something that was, again, watered down, half Sprite or lemonade and half beer. And so they called it a Radler as bicyclists. So we'll have some of those as well. So if pushed hard, I know there are some people in central Germany who prefer a Diesel, which I believe is of a light beer with a Coke.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did not even know about that. And then, of course, for me, unfortunately, I am lederhosen less. Will there be a place for me to get properly outfitted?
Well, you're not going to believe it, but we do have a store, and my wife runs it.
Awesome.
We're lederhosen and dirndls, straight from Germany. Brands that are very familiar to me, being the Trachthorst that I am. So they're available. Yes, we will have. I think we even have some women's lederhosen, which are also becoming more and more popular. But lots of dirndls. Yeah, lots of lederhosen, some shirts. We can hats. We can make sure that you are fully outfitted. In addition to that, we have a gift shop as well where you can buy pins for your hat.
Oh, cool.
Steins. We have a beautiful collection of Steins glass, but also the stoneware ones. Lots of really jewelry. Lots of cool things, some challenge coins as well. In addition to our own shops, we're expecting somewhere between 25 and 30 vendors selling their various wares as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so how much is entry? Where can people find the information and get tickets?
Yeah, you can go onto our website, germanclub.org. You could also follow us on Facebook, American German Club of the Palm Beaches. I believe we also have a Facebook page called Oktoberfest of the Palm Beaches. You'll be directed to Eventbrite, where you can get your entry ticket, which is $10. Parking is $20. And I am telling lots of people that Uber is your friend. Carpooling is your friend. Designated drivers are your friends. So to help you have a great time, help us reduce the amount of parking issues that we may have, which is another reason why we limit the number of people this year at least. Again, next year we're hoping to have the bands back from Germany. We're hoping to open it up to our typical, attendance. But in any case, we have opened it up to Friday nights again. Last year we only had Saturdays and Sundays.
Gotcha.
But we are doing Fridays. So that gives people, they can't get to their favorite day. They can always shoot for Fridays, which, by the way, are a great time as well. That gives you the whole weekend to recover.
Nice. Well, I definitely will need a little bit of time after doing a liter of Dunkel, which I am looking forward to. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
So like I said, we will be there on sometime in the first weekend. What I'd suggest that you do is follow us on social media, especially Instagram at Florida Beer Blog. I'll post more information as I know it, as for when we're going, or if you'll be able to meet up with us, if you'll be able to listen to some of the interviews. Maybe not. I'm not totally sure how it's going to work, but we will definitely be releasing part 2 when we can. Part 2 will either be next week or the week after that. We also have another couple great interviews that are going to be coming up momentarily. So we do have an awesome next couple of episodes of the Florida Beer Podcast for you to listen to. And the best way for you to be notified is to make sure to follow us on social media or subscribe to us on the podcasting app of your choice. Hopefully you're listening to us on iHeartRadio or Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, one of those amazing places. If you don't, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you can leave a rating, give us a nice 5 stars. It really does help us get the word out about all the amazing things that are happening in Florida craft beer. As we know more about the breweries that were affected by Hurricane Ian, we will make sure to put that out there as well. And other than that, I cannot wait to get my Märzen on. So thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week. Drink Florida craft. And German craft too.